Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Yacach. Come, let us reason together. Today I have the phenomenal, incredible Muyiwa Olarewaju MBE. How do you interview somebody who has interviewed practically everybody in the world? I don't know how I'm going to do it. So, Minister Muyiwa, welcome to Yacach.
Thank you.
It was fantastic yesterday and today. And I don't know where you get your energy from, because
I don't know anyone that can live around you and Pastor Gloria and not have energy. It's true. I mean, we've known each other for a couple of decades.
And
I don't see the energy waning in your circle.
Wow. Talking about 20 years and more plus.
Can you imagine?
Jesus.
I was looking at people in your church who weren't born.
No,
and it's incredible as we're coming to the studio. A young man stops you to say,
Panache,
Panache is a drummer, stops you to say, can I meet him? He's like, yeah. And that's one of the things I love about you and the church and the movement, is the fact that, and this is one of the things that made relationship easy. Pastor Chris is no airs or graces, and at the same time there's this great respect or great consideration for protocol, but there was no airs and graces, because you like, just meet him. And then it turns out I met the kid when he was
7 years old.
So things like that, it gives me energy. It gives me energy, and I have to put on record, just to those who are watching, I am so grateful. So I'm aware of the accolades. I'm aware of, the OBE was a big thing for me. The things I do, a big thing for me, and it was recently a chap who was he was our CEO at Premier Radio, and he passed away. And my wife said, I went to visit him on his dying bed, and my wife had sent me a voice note to play to him. And she said to him, she says, thank you for, and he's an older white guy, right? Says, thank you for allowing my husband to be. And she says, my husband doesn't have friends, and he chooses it like that. He said, but somehow you and him, and it dawned on me. And then I got to thinking, the people who meant something to me and I connect with, and I realized, this morning I was scrolling through messages. I've got messages from when you were in France and all those. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have relationship with
all these years.
I'm so grateful for it, because
to be part of the story.
it's an incredible story, which I think, if you were driven by marketing and promotions, you would, the pile of books we'll have to start with would be so, and then there'll be so much to say. But I think that's another thing that I love about you and your wife and the ministry. It's authentic. It's not just authentic in words. It's authentic for real, and I think that's one of the reasons we connect, and I hope long may it continue.
I was going to ask, the next question I was going to ask was, this is your first time in so many years being here. So what's your impression of CICC now? I know you go to so many churches, you've seen the works, you've seen everything. So
I've seen from churches who have there's a church I have in mind. They have great facility. For the children alone, if you can imagine this, Pastor, for the children alone, you have to drive to the top of the building, you drop off the children, there is a slide that the children jump on. They slide all the way down to their own building, and they land in front of the stage. And there's music, there's lights and everything. For the teenagers, there's a whole corridor that has Nintendo and Wii U and all that just for the the teenagers church look like something of then the adults church. So from that, I've seen that, I've seen the smaller church. But the one thing, and this is, you could say it's subjective. One thing for me is it's not often that you see a place where you know
the backstory.
Apart from knowing the backstory, but also believe in your heart that this is about God and God is here. And for me, the testament of that are the lives changed, because what I see with CICC is not migration of bodies. These are people being and watching also the message and the language in the house. It's about evangelism. You get on the streets and tell someone about Jesus, and that speaks to why the work is. I mean, the last time I was here, we just bought this building. Now I come here, there's Bradford, there's Manchester, there's Hull, there's all these different places, and it's because souls have been added to the kingdom. So for me, my impressions is this: there's life here. The life of Christ is here, and the life of Christ is characterized not by how many people are falling over. No. It's by lives change. It's by I'm standing in the corridor, and there are people from the community coming in to eat.
To get food.
That's for me is the life of Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Then, so let's come to you. I'm going to pretend I don't know you. So, who is Muyiwa, and what makes you such a great worshiper? I mean, I know you are the first generation minister in your family. So when I say minister, I'm talking about like on stage and all that.
Yes.
So what is the story? What brought you to the stage?
So for me, it's a story of covenant, really, because my mother, my late mother, she had two girls and wanted a boy, but my dad was done. My dad was like, I don't want any more children. Now, I come from a line where my father was a Muslim. My Muyiwa Olarewaju, he was a Muslim. My mother actually taught him how to pray. She taught him how to kneel down, pray. And when my father became a Christian, he became an infidel to his family.
Yeah, wow.
And it's interesting because in Nigeria, his family his father was the first one in the city that he comes from. He was something of a king. In Africa we got kings coming out of our heirs, but he was a real, what we'll call an influencer, but he was Muslim, and for my father to break away from that meant he cut off everything.
Brought shame to the family.
So I'm coming from that. He didn't want any more girls. My mother wanted a boy. He didn't want any more children because of two girls. So my mom says she prays. She has a dream where in the dream she was being handed a boy, and she wanted to grab the boy, and they said no, only if you give him back. And she said, of course. She says yes. So she grabs the boy, and then she does the do with my dad for not telling my dad. She gets pregnant, so she tells my dad first. I want to. It was a boy. That's where my name comes from, Muyiwa. And an interesting thing about that, in our culture, in the Nigerian culture, and I think it's similar in a lot of West Africa, after a few days, there's a naming ceremony.
Yeah.
So my naming ceremony, in Nigeria, we have long names. So everyone gives an auntie, next door neighbor, even the car driver. So they had all these names. And my mum said, just before the naming ceremony was to happen, she started hearing a ringing bell. And she ran outside because she couldn't bear it. And then she heard the same voice from her dream that said, all these names are not his. I brought this one. So hence she and this for me was what was significant for me about this was that my father listened. because
normally it's a man who has to give the names.
yeah. So my mom goes to my dad and she says, "Listen, they just told me that his name and not all these names." So and you know, in our culture, it's the elders that own that moment. Even though the parents are there, it's the elders that own. So you don't come and tell the elders, "We're throwing out your name. Who are you?" But somehow, in the sovereign will of God, He allowed everyone to acquiesce.
Wow.
And they said no. So then they gave me the name Oluwalumueleyiwa, which means God has brought this one. And then Adebayo, which is a name from my dad. And all the rest that I usually cite are what we call Oriki, which is like titles that I have. And for me, that was the place. And I think that informed everything we that happens now, because I studied music. I wanted to do pop music. I worked in Sony. I looked after Mariah Carey, Bob Dylan, Maxwell. That was my journey to doing pop music. And I had someone from New York pumping in, and this is years ago, Rev, years ago, pumping in $40,000 a year into my pop project, and it was flopping. Imagine, I'm working in the record company. I have all the contact. It's not somebody I could go into the next office and say, "Guys, here's my record." I had money being pumped into it from New York, yet it wasn't working. And it was as the reason of the covenant that was already...
Something was working against what you're trying to do.
And so once we hit the gospel street and praise and worship, it just took off. So that's I think it was a covenant, and that for me speaks to a lot of what I do. That, you know, be serious with the words you say, with the agreements you make, knowing that there is power in it.
Because you yourself, you're a covenant.
You know.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. So what brought you to the place where you interview all these people? You know, I can understand the music bit, but how do you go from there to doing Turning Point and doing radio and doing?
I call it it just happened. I think I'm gonna try and follow your example and write some book. It just happened.
I think you should.
It just happened that I was in church, sitting down with a friend of mine, my best friend Eddie Martin. Call him he works under the name Quincy Jones, so he's done people like Whitney, Chris Brown, all that, but he's a bona fide born again. We were sitting in church. The preaching was boring. So, honestly, so we went out to talk, and he says, "Listen, let's do a project for God." So it just happened. We called all our friends. This one from Westlife. This one, we came together, did 4 albums, right? It just happened that we said, okay, now we've recorded the album, or I'm trying to do pop music. Let's just give the album to a record company to be carrying on with whilst we carry on with our lives. It just happened that the record company, then it's one of the big Christian record companies, rejected it. And they rejected it, Rev, because when they didn't know who it was, they thought, they said, this is great praise and worship, we want to meet them. When they met me and saw that, it's Muyiwa Olarewaju, they said, great gospel. The people will not understand. Gospel is it's only for a small niche. Praise and worship is for everyone. So when they didn't see who I was, it was for everyone. Once they saw who I was, it was gospel. So they wouldn't take it. And it just happened that we thought, we spent money on this thing. Let's use our expertise to exploit it. It just happened that someone took that CD and gave it to someone at Premier Radio. I didn't know what Premier Radio was. And said, I gave it to the head of music. And so I called, and there's so many testimonies in this, where called the head of music. The guy abused me off the phone. Said, "I'm busy. I do this, da 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 da." I said, "I'm sorry. They told me to call you.
That's why."
Let me tell you, as we speak now, I am the head of music for this. I have the job that
That guy had.
But
Wow.
But we'll park that, right? So it just happened that he refused it. Somebody else in the station picked it up. They said, oh, what? So they played it for. So Premier has 3 radio stations now. Back then, it was just 1 radio station and 1 online, which is a smaller gospel matter. They were playing it for that. It just happened that Premier had been looking for a presenter for the gospel show for a year. They didn't have one. The chief exec hears this guy, and the head of programming says to the chief exec, oh, I know the guy. It just happened they said, come for an interview. I thought it was so I could play my music. They offered me a show. I started doing the show. My thing is when I'm doing something, I do it as though it's my business. So I came to the place. I saw people complain, it's not my job. It's not my, this is for God. Let's do it. So I started doing everything, not knowing that I was causing a problem. So 1 show became 2 shows, became 3 shows.
Wow.
So next, Muyiwa was on Premier Radio from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. every single day of the week. It just happened, Rev, that there's a gentleman called Victor Ladokun, who was the one that started the show Turning Point 26 years ago.
Yeah.
He was looking after a gentleman who was a pastor in my old church, right? So I was thinking, how's Pastor Charles? He's left London. He's now studying in America. I don't know how. So occasionally I'll say, how's, like I would do sometimes. You would get a text from me saying, Rev, how you doing?
How you doing? Yeah.
So I was looking for this guy. I couldn't find him. I didn't realize that Victor Ladokun, who was now housing one of my pastors, his sister had been telling him, listen, there's this guy on Premier Radio. Now, he lives in America. His sister lives in London. He said, there's this guy that comes on Premier Radio, and when he starts his show, he says, my name is Muyiwa Olarewaju. So he's intrigued. And it then happens that the day after about a year that I get to speak to Pastor Charles, who's now living with him, Pastor Charles says, guess what? Victor Adakun's been looking for you. What's he looking for me for? He comes on the phone. He says, Muyiwa on Premier, because that's how they would announce me back then. He just happens. He said, please come, because now he'd done some research and saw that, okay, you do river songs. He said, come to the States and be guest on Turning Point. This is 7 years before I become a presenter of something. I go as a guest. When we finish, he said to me, speak to Chapel, because they have Turning Point, CBN, who do Turning Point, probably have like just under 2,000 staff in the States. And so they have what they call chapel, where everyone will come together. So he said, can you speak there? So I spoke. When we finished, he was walking me back to the hotel. And forgive me for talking so much. I just want to get it out. He says to me, he looked at me and says, how would you like to take over this show when I'm done? I'm like, of course, I was like, yeah. I wasn't thinking 7 years later, Rev, I get a call from the producer of the show. Said, we've been looking for a presenter. Now, remember the same thing happened with the Premier. Premier had been looking for a presenter for a year. Yeah. And then they heard, and then they gave me the show. So Turning Point too, they said this Victor Ladokun now left. They said they tried different people, but they were in prayer. And the producer heard my name.
Wow.
Now, for me, if my name was Jeff,
it would make sense.
It makes sense. But Muyiwa didn't make sense. And she's an American woman.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So they flew me out to the States to test. Even I knew, because I wasn't doing TV, even I knew that I was no good. I said to their chief, when I finished my screen test, I said, how many other people are you trying? She said, we don't have a plan B. That's how I ended up.
So you have plan A, B, and C.
That's how I ended up doing from Premier to Turning Point to all these things. It just happened. It just happened.
Yeah. Wow. And that's taking you around the world.
It has.
How do you maintain, with all the fame and everything, you maintain this simplicity? I mean, like you're saying, I've known you for about 20 years. You haven't changed. You're just the same old.
I think one of the things, Pastor, is the relationships in value, because I can't imagine me becoming heady and highfalutin and then talking to Chris Wilsonando, because I feel like if not you, Rev Gloria will say, "Oh, brother, what's wrong with you?"
What's changing?
You know? So I think it's and apart from that, it's in my house. I think one of the key things, and it's decisions you make. Really, you choose to follow the Lord for real, for real. We have a thing in my house, rule number 6. It was coined by Benjamin Zander, who was the famous conductor of Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. Rule number 6 is, don't take yourself so seriously. You're not that important. So that's a guiding principle in our house, and also for me, understanding that really it's about God for real. I mean, of course, I'm a Nigerian man. I have moments where I think, do you know who I am? My wife will start laughing. Say, do you know who you are? Yeah. But I think it's one, being aware of who we are really in Christ, and then having the right relationships around you that hold you to account. And holding you to account doesn't mean they are sitting with you all the time. You value them. So for me, I'm like, I want to live my life in such a way that when Pastor Chris and Pastor Gloria think of me, it's for joy, not for pain, because we know too many people who were in the ministry with us. Some of them were ahead of us.
Yeah.
Now
They're nowhere.
They're nowhere, and I mean, some of them don't even. The name of Jesus is not something they even want to mention.
Yeah.
So what keeps me, relationships, my wife, and key relationships around you, and then just the Holy Spirit cannot be living inside of you. And you
True.
yeah,
True.
because that raises all sorts of questions when we talk about ministry and ministers. I mean, the stories that you know in your journey, stories that I could tell. It raises all sorts of questions, but one of the things I've come to, I remember one day I flew in from the States, and I landed at Terminal 5, and I saw something. I was outraged. I was going to say something and put it on, and I heard the Holy Spirit say to me, "Have I made you the police over them?" And now me, I'm arguing with God. Is that really you? Show me in your word so I know that it's you. And then I was taken to the book where it says the wheat and the tear will grow together. At that point, I said,
Yes.
and then I was reminded of Apostle Paul, who says, "Be at peace with all men and mind your own business." At that point, I said, I'm not Holy Spiritual. Let me just say, let wheat and tear grow together, and then the Lord of the harvest
We separate. Yeah. So the last question before we go. If you had the benefit of speaking to 17, 16-year-old Muyiwa, with the benefit of your experience, what you know now, what would you say to him?
What would I say to him? I'll say a few things to him. One of the things I'll probably say to him is, be generous. You are, but invest more. Invest more. That money you're throwing around, you're giving to this one, giving to that, put it in property. I would say that to him. I would say to him, don't cry so much. It's not that bad. It's not to kill you. I would say to him, we will read more. I would say to him, invest more. I would say to him, read more. And I would say to him, fear less. And fear less and be bolder. I would say
those are gems, Those are gems.
Those are some of the things I'd certainly say.
Read more, invest more, fear less, Be bold. Wow. That's great. Well, I can talk to this man for hours and hours and hours, and because I can't get enough of him. But for the sake of time, we'll pause here and continue another time until we come back your way next week. This has been your host, Pastor Chris, and I'll see you next week. It's Yacach. Shalom, peace. God bless you.